Welcome once again to my lair. I am your host, Numbskull the Lich, alongside my familiar / talking crow, Mango. And today we will be talking about various forest environments and why they're interesting and often the first locations that many adventurers set off and find right outside their home. I believe we are starting with the Great Jara Forest, a recommendation from Mango. So would you like to tell us about it?
Once the territory of the great storm dragon Veldora, over 300 years ago, this forest was the territory of the great storm dragon Veldora. This is where he lived until he crushed an army from an eastern nation and was sealed away by a great hero. During his imprisonment, his presence alone was enough to dissuade further invasion by humans and allowed the forest to become a safe haven for smaller monsters who believed they were receiving divine protection from the beast.
Interesting. So, what other inhabitants would be in this forest?
Well, the first population you're likely to notice is that of the goblins. Other residents include the ogres, lizardmen, and orcs. The dryads moved in at a point in the past when their queen met her untimely end and have taken over a sort of guardianship and maintenance of the forest to keep it lush.
So, not many elves in this forest? That seems unusual.
The elves of this land live largely in a country known as the Sorceress Dynasty of Sarion. They used to be a more widespread population during a time where the Super Magic Kingdom was present in the area. But since then they have relegated themselves to their own land that they have claimed for themselves.
And how does this forest receive various visitors searching for their fame and fortune?
The visitors to this forest might find themselves coming down from the Great Connaught Mountains or coming along the Great Amelda River.
Is it hostile or?
Some inhabitants are more hostile than others. The goblins seem to be more of a cowardly nature, while the orcs, ogres, and possibly even lizard men are much less open to visitors in their territory.
Any interesting landmarks or geographical locations?
Within the center of the Great Jura Forest, you'll find Lake Sis. The marshlands that surround the lake are controlled by the lizard men, and there are a great deal of caves in the general area.
Is there any super predators kind of keeping everything in check, or is it the races themselves that kind of perform that role?
Generally, I think it would be fair to say the tribes keep their own peace, given that Veldora's presence alone is enough to deter most external forces from influencing them.
Well, I think we can move on to the next forest in question. The Forbidden Forest, located outside the magic school Hogwarts. Now, unlike some of the other forests, this one is not necessarily a completely wild forest. It is maintained, usually by the school's groundskeeper of the time, and kept stocked with various magical beasts, both sentient and more animalistic. You can find unicorns, centaurs, giant spiders, and more all throughout this forest. And it has rumors and superstitions from the students that inhabit this nearby school. Many will attempt sneaking in there for various reasons, whether to try and acquire ingredients for whatever interesting potion or concoction they might be making outside of school hours, or on a dare. There are many things students get up to when left to their own devices over a weekend.
Sometimes you'll notice that whether the administration of present or of the past, the school will use the forest to hide away some secrets, as it is forbidden to students. For example, the Forest Vault, one of the cursed vaults created by someone from the history of Hogwarts, be that one of the founders or a teacher who has gone insane, or in the Triwizard Tournament in the year 1994, the school used the Forbidden Forest to hide the dragons that were going to be battled by the participants, or evaded by the participants of that year's Triwizard Tournament.
But, needless to say, unlike a typical forest environment, this isn't one where the adventurers are expected to travel through on their way to a separate location. This is closer to a game reserve or a natural sanctuary that is cultivated and kept around with a purpose. Often the purpose is training others for what all could be gathered from such a location. But that said, I believe we can move on to the next forest, a much older forest, Fangorn Forest of Middle-earth. So this was encountered after breaking up of the Fellowship carrying the ring to Mordor, and Merry and Pippin found themselves stranded here, to find out later that not only is this an extremely old forest, but it is an extremely old forest populated by Ents, giant tree people, who mostly take care of this forest. It is also a fairly cultivated forest, but in a much gentler way. The Ents are slow, generally, to change, with only some of their younger members being quick to anger or to really shake up the way of things. However, during the War of the Rings, as Fangorn was being chopped down for lumber by Sauron, the trees had no choice other than to rouse and make their way to war. So in a way, it's a little bit of what happens when the forest instead decides to come to you, because when the forest is that old, there's no real telling what is within them. The Treants did make short work of much of Isengard's defenses, stomping out orcs and generally being giant tree people. It is hard to argue with giant tree people. From there, I think we can move on to the continent of Tamriel and the region of Volcrith, a very heavily forested region of Skyrim. Volcrith being the name both of the hold and the major capital city within, which it is a very good example of everything that a forest can hide within itself. Within the forest surrounding Volcrith, you have the hidden lair of the Assassin's Guild, the Dark Brotherhood. You have bandits camped out in old logging camps You have mines that have also been taken over by bandits. Ruins, watchtowers, all of this hidden amongst the trees and the landscape.
Things can be hidden even without masking them behind the trees. For example, if you're wandering along and you come across a lonely lumber mill by the name of Half Moon Mill, the residents are cheery and pleasant enough. They'll even let you stay the night. However, as one will find out if they engage with the Dark Brotherhood's less than savory business practices, the residents of Half Moon Mill are indeed vampires. This showcases how even if things are seemingly normal on the surface, once you start to poke just a little bit deeper, you may find more than you realized was there.
And even where obvious danger exists, such as the giant funeral burial grounds called Bleak Falls Barrow, there is often more to such locations than what would originally be thought. Just a thing to keep in mind when roaming about forests. Even an obvious landmark can have more dangers than one would think. And that will move us on to our last forest, the Farani Forest, located on Galorian. This is a very wild forest full of life, fae, illusion magic, and hidden towns. Whenever you go about a forest like this, it is difficult to know what you will find along any given trail. When the trees can be covered in assassin vines, somewhere in various caves you might find a dragon dwelling there for centuries that has kept the population in a form of natural equilibrium, and elves utilizing illusions to hide their towns from those that they would prefer to keep out, as more isolationists will often do. You can find many valuable ingredients and treasures from either ruins or natural wonders within a forest like this. You could potentially be asked to go and hunt down a troublesome monster that has moved in and started to disrupt the natural equilibrium. However, it is also just as easy of a place where you get in way over your head, and in the best case scenario, return to whatever town or city sent you on this quest with failure in your eyes and your tail between your legs, if you come back at all. To the south of this forest is a vast swamp that is overgrown and dangerous and thought to be cursed, because it is corrupted by demons and the influence of the demon lord Tree Raiser. But that is a wander a bit too far from the current discussion. If the forest is your first environment after leaving your town, do not get careless. Understand that while you will make your camps, you will do everything in your power to protect yourself, the forest is hungry, and it will not hesitate to consume you and the rest of your party if a hungry predator thinks that you are worth that fight. That's not to consider the various bandits who may try to rob you if you are following obvious paths or rivers, or goblins that will create their own little hovels and hidey holes and do similar things. The forest is a dangerous place. Do not get overconfident. Make your camps, set your fires, and be safe. I believe that will bring this conversation to an end. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Please, if you liked this discussion, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.